Hi guys, working on today. This is a late 1950s pacemaker PM-20. I've got it upside down on the bench here. This is like a intercom PA amp. It's a little 6v6, like 20 watt amplifier. The customer who brought this in, he wants this turned into a guitar amp. This was made by Bell, who also made Gibson guitar amps in the 50s. And I did a little research, and it turns out Ted Nugent supposedly used a little Gibson, I believe GA15, to record the Cat Scratch Fever album and some of his other stuff from that era. And looking up the schematic for this and for that guitar amp, they're very, very, very close. They're very similar. Being an intercom amp, this has a few different features. This has got a 5-position tone control. It's got a microphone input, phono input. There is another phono input on the top. It is not stereo, it's just mono, but it just sums your two signals together. So I'm thinking we can turn that into a high and a low gain input for guitar. The circuit, everything looks original, untouched, except back here. Somebody's added a couple of different jacks and some bits of wiring. This does have a, on the schematic for the output, you've got a your normal 4, 8, 16 ohm taps. I'm looking off into space with the camera here. But you've got 4, 8, 16 ohm taps, and then you've got a 250 ohm tap right here. I'm going to do some looking. I mean, that might drive headphones of that 250 ohm tap. We may have to do a little bit of tweaking or something. But that might drive a pair of headphones. That could be a cool little feature. I'm going to start though by just cleaning this thing up. We're going to clean all the pots, clean the tube sockets, all these capacitors. This guy, 20 UF, 10 UF, 100 UF. This one's a 10 and a 10. This one. Those are, at this age, those are all going to be bad. These are pretty tiny values, 20 UF on your main power supply. So I am going to double those values when I replace them. And I've got some nice F&T caps for those. And we will be using individual capacitors rather than the 3 in a row. We're going to do that. I'm going to replace all the resistors. I'm seeing this resistor here in the power supply. I don't know if you can tell on camera, but it looks a little burnt. So we're going to replace all of the resistors in the power supply with good 2 watt heavy duty resistors. I want to get this running before we do change any part values or try to modify anything to make it more of a guitar friendly amplifier. That's always the first step, is get it working before you mod. We'll clean the pots. I'm going to put a 3-pole power plug, a grounded plug on it. All right, I'll go ahead and get started on that, and I'll catch up with you guys in a bit. All right, guys, I'm starting to replace some of these capacitors, and I just want to take a minute and show you this real quick. Here's our big main power. And this one we've got 20 UF, 20 UF, and 100 UF cap. I'm replacing that. I'm upping the 20 UF to a 47, the 10 UF to a 22, and the 100 UF is staying. And that's just because the power supplies in these old amps like this are just ridiculously underbuilt, especially considering we're turning this into a guitar amp, and it's going to be pushed a lot harder than it would as an intercom amp that it originally was. But I just want to show you this. I've got my cheapy meter here. It's not as accurate as my big good one, but it's a lot more. It's good enough and it's convenient. So I'm on the 20 UF capacitor in this multi-cap testing. So I got 28 UF. So if you just had a capacitor, like a multimeter that would with a capacitance test, you would see that and you'd be like, well, that's fine. But look at our ESR, 27 ohms, V-loss 6.9%, monstrously high numbers. Even though the capacitance tests good, that is definitely a bad cap. Real quick, I'll switch over to our new one, and I will test the 20 UF cap on that new bundle I put together. Takes a minute. So there we've got 22 UF, 1.8 ohms ESR, 0.8% V-loss. So, and what that ESR means is it basically kind of tells you the capacitor's ability to deal with voltage fluctuations, which is exactly a filter capacitor's job. So the lower the number, the better. Again, this one, even though the capacitance tests good, completely unusable ESR in that original cap. And our new F&T tested nice and low, right where we would expect it. Another thing I found bad, where did I put it here, is one of these big 1.5K resistors in the power supply. There's two of these in series. The one of these tested fine. The one of these that showed some heat damage, that one tested almost 3K on its own. So that's a part that's definitely drifted out of spec and gone bad. All right, just wanted to show you guys that quick. I'm going to get back to work. We'll take a look at that, at this thing when it's all back together. All right, we're back. Got a ton of stuff done in here. I did all those filter caps for the power supply there, and those units there. Replaced these resistors. The one of those was way out of spec. The other one was okay. Replaced them both. Cleaned up all this wiring, extra wires that were hanging on all this output stuff. Wired in our output jacks. And I do have just this wire hanging off here for now, so we can test. Right now this has old school speaker connections on it. I think we're going to get rid of this, and we're going to put in a switch so you can switch between your different impedance loads. For now though, for testing, is what it is. Grounded power cord. That's done. I got rid of the extra wiring for this outlet here. So that's gone. Cleaned all the pots, especially this one was really stiff. They're moving nice and easy now. The switch, everything feels good. And I did the, because this had that microphone input on it, changed that to a guitar jack. And while I was in there, you know, I already had to have a bunch of stuff in this part of the circuit part to change that. So I went ahead and replaced a couple of these capacitors in here that I was planning on for our conversion to make it more guitar friendly. So they're just a more guitar friendly value than what was in there. And those were ceramic caps. And anytime you see ceramic caps in an audio circuit, they are, it's just by nature, ceramic caps are microphonic. So they're not necessarily ideal for that application. There is one more in here that we'll replace later when we get into more mods. But for right now, I just wanted to get the minimum done to get it cleaned up so we can power it up and make sure, you know, the core of everything works before we get into, you know, any major changes or modifications. So that's where we're at right now. I'll get it, oh yeah, and there's the wiring for the power lights. They just need wired up, but we'll get to that. I'm going to power it up. I'm going to make sure our voltages all look good, and then we'll put the tubes in it and hook it up to a cabinet, see what sound comes out of it. And then we'll decide for sure on the mods to do from there. Alright, so there is our little pacemaker amp. Powered up, the tubes are glowing. Plugged into a cab, she's running nice and quiet. Seems to work. Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good. Nothing's scratchy. She's quiet. This tone control, rather than having like a tone control like you would expect on a guitar amp, this is a little 5-way. Does some cool things. We're going to leave that. That's actually a really cool little feature. Some cool sounds in there. It's maybe not designed or intended for a guitar, but it's actually pretty cool. So now we'll talk about some mods we're going to do here. Make this thing a little more of a guitar amp. First off, we're going to turn this phono level into a post-phase master volume. We're going to turn these phono inputs. They're just paralleled, so they just run to the same place. It doesn't matter which one we use. We'll turn one of these into a low gain input. So you'll have a normal gain input and a lower gain input for your guitar. You'll have a post-phase master volume. There's one or two other capacitors in the amp that we're going to just swap values on, make it a little more ideal for a guitar. And that's all we're going to do on this one. Some other things you could do. So this uses a 12AX7 phase inverter and then a pair of 6AV6 tubes. So a tube like a 12AX7 or an AT7 or an ECC83, they're a dual circuit tube, a twin triode. So there's two circuits in one tube. You can build two circuits using one of those tubes. These are essentially the same thing, only half. So these are just one circuit each. So we could condense this. We could take these out of here and put in a 12AX7 and do the work that both of these tubes are doing. And that means we could add another 12AX7. So there's another 2 gain stages that we could potentially put in this amp. You could turn this into screaming little beast if you wanted to, but I don't think that's really the right thing for this project and this customer. But I mean, if you're working on one of these, it's definitely there. It wouldn't be that hard to do. Just some food for thought. Tubes all seem good. Everything's quiet. I'm not hearing anything squealing. All right, I'm gonna power this thing off, and we'll start looking at some of these mods. Okay, here is our amp with our proposed mods done. I have not hooked this up yet and tested it, but it is all in one piece, and hopefully it's all going to work. I'm gonna walk you through the schematic and show you what changes I did make, and then I'll get this hooked up and play test it a little bit, see if there's any changes we need to make, see if we have good mods, bad mods. This all might have been a terrible idea. We never know till we try it. Here's our schematic. So starting from the input, just change that microphone input to a regular jack for a guitar. Change that ceramic cap to a 0.022. After our first tube, same thing, change the ceramic cap to 0.022. Now here, after that first volume control, we have our phono circuit. That's been completely removed, and I put a 1 meg resistor to ground right there. Rather than this circuit, there's a 1 meg resistor to ground. And up here, so going to the input on our volume control, I've got another jack that is in one of the holes that was a phono input. Another jack, capacitor into that input as a low gain input. It's skipping that first gain stage. After that, we completely left alone this really cool 5-way tone switch here. Left that alone. That's kind of neat, unique. Get into the phase inverter circuit. I changed another one of those ceramic caps to a 0.022. Then after that, after our phase inverter, I added a post-phase master volume, and I split it right after the 0.05 cap on both sides. And that is a 1 meg stereo pod I put in there. Pretty straightforward. I did go through and I checked values on the resistors, original resistors through the amp. These original red capacitors in here, Tiny Chief, I think they're called in there. Those tested reasonably within spec. I didn't see anything bad in there, so I don't feel a need to change any of those. When I had it hooked up before, it wasn't making any noises, any weird pops or anything like that. There it is. That's otherwise in the power section, power supply. All I really did is Change these to 1 watt, 1.5K 1 watt resistors to a 3 watt resistor. So they're much heavier duty, and the one of those was burnt and out of spec. I changed our 20 UF cap to a 40, and over here there's 1, 2, 3 10 UF caps that got changed to 20s, just to stiffen things up a little bit. There you have it. That's everything I've done. We're going to get it put back together, see what it does, see if it's good, bad, see if there's any other changes we need to make. I'll be back in a few minutes. All right, one last look at our schematic here. I did, after we got this up and running and played it a bit, keeping in mind this was designed as an intercom amp and a phono input. So there was a lot more low end coming through than you necessarily want in your guitar signal. Just really fuzzy, ugly, especially with the gain cranked up. Kind of ugly bottom end. So I did end up going in and replacing this cap here. Was a 0.05. Put a 0.022 in there. And then these two here, also 0.05s. Went to 0.022, cleaned that up quite a bit. These caps that came out, these they test okay. There's nothing wrong with them. Just voicing, and I did have that in mind going in, but it's not really a good idea to go in with a cut and paste attitude before you've really played something. So there it is. We'll get this all buttoned up, and we'll show you what it sounds like. One more quick thing on the back panel. I did dig up a switch. So now we've got an impedance switch. Definitely also want to throw out a big thank you to Mark from Fowler Valve Amps here in Moorhead, Minnesota. It is always great to be able to toss ideas off someone else, especially when you're dealing with something like this that's not it's not just a standard repair. You know, you're not rebuilding a Fender hot rod. A little more uncharted territory. Also hooked me up with the switch, so got to throw that out there. All right, let's get this plugged in. All right, here we've got our front panel. I got our input. I did another low gain input here. Gain, post phase master. This really cool little 5-way tone switch. This thing's really cool. Like these little lunchbox guitar heads have gotten really popular, and here's this is like the Alpha, the original. Colin's going to play for us for a minute here and show you what this guy sounds like. Tubes are a little tiny bit microphonic. I'm sure you can hear that. But yeah, otherwise this thing's pretty cool, ready to go. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, check out our other videos.